Hi. Today we're going to be looking at the topic of whether or not the UK and Europe should take more refugees. And we're going to focus on helping you come up with some arguments to counter the arguments against the idea of taking more refugees. So how are we going to do that? We are first going to look at the background of the crisis, then we're going to identify some of the common reasons people are against letting more refugees in, and then we're going to look at ways to counter those arguments. So, firstly, some background. We're going to be focusing on refugees who are coming from Syria. So the Syrian civil war started in 2011. So we're looking at nearly a decade of a very violent conflict. Before the war started, there were about 22 million people living in Syria. But since then, the UN has identified 13.5 million of those people as displaced. So that's more than half the population. And what displaced means is that they're people who can't stay in their homes anymore. They've had to flee their homes, whether that's because of direct violence, so their homes have been bombed or shelled, so don't exist anymore. It might be that where they live is now occupied territory, and so it isn't safe for them to live there because whoever's occupied it doesn't like them. Or you also have areas where key things, key parts of infrastructure or ways that you live your life, like schools, hospitals, things like that, have been bombed and you don't have access to that, so you need to leave and move somewhere safely. So where have the displaced people gone? Well, there's still a proportion of people living in Syria, but the ones who have left Syria, as you can see, are primarily in refugee camps in Turkey. A lot of Syrians have also stayed in the Middle East, despite what a lot of media says, where there's this idea that the majority of Syrian refugees are in Europe. You can still see that it's in Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan has a huge percentage of those refugees. And then the next biggest taker and the highest taker in Europe is Germany. So let's look at some of the common arguments and how we can respond to it. Now, the first one is our responsibility is to our own citizens. And so I actually think Angela Merkel has this lovely quote. So she's the Chancellor of Germany, and she worked really hard for Germany to accept and integrate lots of refugees. She says, every person who comes is a human being and has the right to be treated as such. It's really important to remember when we're talking about refugees that they are people who just want to be able to have their lives back to normal, to be free from suffering. So we do have a responsibility to the rest of humankind. The next one is, oh, there's no room in our country for refugees. One of the ways you can see how busy a country is, how much space it has, is you can look at something called population density, which is an average of the overall amount of people living in your country compared to the amount of space that your country has, so in kilometers squared. The UK has got about 273 people per kilometre squared. What does that mean in the sense of the refugee crisis? Well, we can look at a good comparison is with the Netherlands, which has 509 people per kilometre squared. So in the same amount of space in the Netherlands, about 1.5 times the amount of people as they are in the UK. This is important because the Netherlands has taken more than 3 times the amount of refugees, despite having less space. So if the Netherlands can do it, the UK absolutely can. We're already overrun with refugees, is another comment. But when you look at the statistics behind it, that's just patently untrue. The UK has taken in 10,583 refugees. This is 0.16% of the entire amount of Syrian refugees trying to find a safe home, and it is 0.016% of the UK population. So this idea that the UK is going to be like majoritarily migrants and refugees in soon is absolute nonsense. It's a tiny percentage, and therefore we've got a lot of space to be able to have more people. It's better to give foreign aid and keep them closer to home. Well, where this might seem like it's coming from a good place, the problem is that only about half of the remaining Syrians can actually be reached. Aid organizations get attacked, their facilities are attacked, and as a result, a lot of agencies have actually suspended their work in Syria. Therefore, it's much more effective to actually rehome refugees away from the conflict. will only help far-right parties gain popularity. This is also useful to look at in terms of statistics. So the far-right tend to push that immigration is bad. Refugees only make up 0.1% of overall migrants coming to the UK. And so it's quite a lot for far-right parties to only focus on this. When they have issue with the whole amount of immigration, increasing the amount of refugees isn't going to massively change their rhetoric or give them more power. And finally, but aren't they just coming here to abuse the benefit system? It gets said a lot. And basically, I couldn't find statistics for the amount that refugees use the benefit system, but of the whole amount of non-UK nationals living in the UK, only 7.4% of them were claimants for benefits, and the amount they claimed is actually 5% of the overall money that gets spent. Now, bearing in mind, we've just seen that of all the immigrants in the UK, 0.1% of them are refugees. You can see that refugees are not taking up benefits at all. Even if they are, it is a very, very small amount of money and absolutely manageable. So I hope this video has helped you be able to respond to some of the common reasons people give for not wanting to have more refugees in the UK.